Hi everyone, welcome to my next video. I'm going to talk about that commonly used phrase, there's two sides to every story, because I have a lot to say about that, and it really bothers me every time I hear it. I'm going to tell you why. Because I think it's a phrase that many people have become so accustomed to saying and not understanding maybe even why they say it. Because there's more than two sides to every story. There's as many sides as there are people who were involved in the story, or who heard about the story, or made up part of the story, or even more often, people that had no idea about the story and just made assumptions. So I'm going to tell you something that happened to me years ago, and I've mentioned this before, but it really angered me years ago when this person said that to me. Because what I understood her to mean is that she had no plans whatsoever to believe what I had to say, but every intention to believe her own version. And I think that's what bothers me the most about that phrase, there's always two sides to a story, because that's ridiculous. A story is only a perception anyway. A story is only based in our own reality, because everyone has their own reality, and there is not a universal reality, and that's a whole nother topic. And so, as I mentioned before, and I hope the light is okay in here, it's just a dreary, dark day, and it's very difficult to do lighting in here. And no, my couch is not on fire. It looks like it is, but it isn't. And so this goes back to when I was married to a very violent, out of control man, who, upon hearing me say, "That's it, I want a divorce," he punched me right in the face. Well, he was gone. He took off. He actually left the state, knowing full well that the local cops could not cross the state lines to follow him. And he returned back to his hometown, to his mother's house, which didn't surprise me. Family very protective of him, very supportive of his temper. And so about a week or two went by, and I healed. My face healed, rather, but I was still angry. I was still hurt. I was still devastated. And I had initiated divorce proceedings. And I just, out of the blue, thought, his family seemed to like me when I did meet them. We'd had many dinners at their house. His mother was very friendly to me. His sister and her husband were also very friendly to me. And I loved their kids. So I thought, I'm going to give them a call and see what they have to say. And I sure would like to be understood and have some support in this very emotional, confusing time. Well, I bet you know where this story's going. I dialed the number. His sister answered. And right away, she was clearly annoyed that I even called her, which was hurtful because I was hoping she'd be supportive of me. And when I told her that her brother, in a rage, with a closed fist, had smashed me right square in the face, or actually to the side of my face, next to my left eye, you're right, looking at the video here, she sighed and she said, well, there's always two sides to a story. And I was devastated and angry at the same time, because I so wanted her to have some compassion for me. She knew her brother's rage. He'd had a history of it for years before I ever even met him. And I knew right then she could care less about me, and she was going to do everything in her best interest to protect her brother. But I think that phrase runs deeper even than that. Because sometimes when strangers say that, what they're saying is, I don't think I believe you, because I'm not hearing the other person's side. And until I do, then I'll decide which is the truth. And that's the problem, because neither one matters, because the truth is always going to be evasive in the details, because I may not remember every single detail that someone else does. And that other person may have forgotten some of the details that I remembered. But here's another reason why I'm addressing this in this video. Because this comment came in the video where I'm discussing writing my book about being an estranged parent. And I've gotten this comment a lot. There's always two sides to a story. And what would your daughter's story be? And that is very narrow-minded thinking. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm using that as an effort to raise your awareness in terms of what you're actually saying, and to open your mind and open your eyes to what's really going on. Because when a person shares an experience, that is truly their own experience, from their own perspective, from their own point of reference, from their own emotional state, and their life experiences, and their ability to formulate both the memory and all the emotions that went along with it. And that is their story, and that is my story that I'm going to be writing in my memoir. Now, my daughter most likely has a different version. What would her motives be? I have no idea, because she refuses to talk to me. But I would guess that they would be different, because I truly feel that she's incapable of understanding my emotions, and is probably the reason why she refuses to speak to me. And that is quite a statement that I just said, because I believe that when people estrange themselves from one person, it's not necessarily about the person that they've estranged themselves from, but it's because of reasons of their own that are beyond our control. And that is not to find fault, that is not to find blame, and that is not to find reasoning in their own version of the story. Because when it comes right down to it, it's not about the story at all. It's about where we are after that story happened, and how we're dealing with our feelings, and how we're moving forward or trying to, and how either we're able or unable to share our different versions and come to an understanding. And that's why it really frustrates me when I hear that phrase, well, there's two sides to every story. Because my ex-husband's sister had no intention or interest in hearing my side. And that was her way of brushing me off. And it's very dismissive, and it's very condescending, and I resent it. Yet again, it is what it is, and I'm thankful that I have much more awareness and much more insight, because I have never said that to anybody. Now, when I write my memoir, and I've spoken about this before, a memoir is not about what happened in terms of writing a story. A memoir is a personal recollection of events as best remembered by the author. And I always write a disclaimer in the beginning that I've done my best to recall the following events to the best of my memory and to the best of my knowledge. And I am also including in my opening that I have no intention of causing harm, but every intention of creating awareness, insight, and inspiration to anyone who is interested in reading my book. And for that to happen, I need to tell my story. And I want to tell my story, because my story, to me, I believe, has value for others. Now, I'm sure I'll get a whole lot more comments, maybe even in this video. Well, Barbara, there's always two sides to a story. How about this? Let's say you go to the store and you see a little girl and she wants a candy bar. And of course, they put all the candy down low for the kids, right? So psychologically, they know the kids will want the candy and they'll bug their parents. And most parents will give in and buy them the candy bar, which is what I used to do. Now, let's say you're standing there watching that little girl and she wants the candy bar. I might think it's cute that she's asking her mother for the candy. Another customer might think she's a spoiled brat. And another customer might think the mother is really mean for not giving in and giving that kid the candy bar. And yet another person might think the mother is being too lenient by buying her that candy bar. And so everyone is going to have a different perception based upon their own point of reference. And by point of reference, I mean how we've been wired in life to see the world. There's never going to be two that are alike. There may be many who are similar, but there will never be two that are entirely identical. And that's another reason why I enjoy writing my books, is because I'm merely sharing my side of quote unquote a story or a series of stories and or experiences from my own point of view, from my own point of reference, with my own understanding, my own insight, and even my own questions that I might still have. So every time someone says there's only two sides, there's always two sides to a story, I take it as a very defensive reaction, because they're not seeing, in fact, I believe they're not seeing that the story in itself is not the focus. It is how that event affected the teller of the story. And I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, please ask me, and I would love to talk more about it. And I think by thinking that there's always two sides to a story, there may be thousands of sides to that same story, especially in my situation, because one person may be aware of my estrangement until someone else. And that person may have no idea who I am, how I grew up, how I raised my child, yet they'll have their own life experiences to form their own opinion. And they might twist that story to fit that narrative. And what's really important to note is that I believe this is all done subconsciously. I don't think people intentionally change stories. I think it's just human nature to not remember all of it, or think a blue car was green because it drove by so darn fast and our favorite color is green. I mean, there are just so many altering factors that to respond with that phrase, there's always two sides to a story, is limiting beliefs and limiting ability to understand where that person is even telling the story. And one more very important aspect to all of this that I'd like to include is that sometimes the details in a story has no relevance as to why that person is telling it, because the ultimate reason that person is telling it may be that it has caused them harm, or caused them to be fearful, or caused them to be angry. And that is what needs to be addressed, not the details in the story. And if there are a variation of stories, then it can be addressed in a polite and honest way. And if the other person adamantly claims that they have a different version, yet they refuse to speak about it, then that's also a defense mechanism, I believe. And that is something that I was subjected to, because after countless times of trying to talk about these various stories and experiences, I was shut down, ignored, and shunned. So is my story and all of my experiences true? Well, they're my truths. They're my truths because they are, to the best of my recollection, how they happened. Now, what's interesting about me is I can remember things vividly when I was even 3 years old. And those flashes of time remain vivid in my mind because they were so deeply important to me and so deeply emotional that when I wrote my first book, I was actually reliving them all over again. And that's why I can remember such detail, because the impact of even hurtful memories, I believe, are the reasons why they remain so vivid. And I think there's a technical word for that. I don't recall what it is. But when we're in shock or when we're highly emotional, sometimes those moments are forever seared into our brain. And even if we don't want to remember them anymore, they continue to come back and haunt us, which is a lot about what post-traumatic stress disorder is and reoccurring nightmares. And yes, I still have them. I still have flashes of time that bother me at night, but they've happened so often now that they no longer really affect me. They're more annoying than anything else. So the next time you might want to think twice about telling someone there's always two sides to a story, because maybe the other side isn't accurate either. And maybe neither one are 100% accurate. Yet ask yourself, does it really matter if they're 100% accurate? Because the overall theme of the story is what impact that story had. Now here's one that I'll tell you that remains forever in my brain. And I'm running out of time, but I'll tell you this one because I wrote about this in my memoir. And I can relive this as if I am experiencing it all over again. And this is something my family never discussed after it happened, as they always denied the violence in my home. And I have to say this really quick because I'm running out of time. I was 16 years old. I was getting ready to leave the house for high school. I had my books in my arms, and our front hall steps led into our front living room rather. And it was an old Victorian home. From the living room, I could look through our dining room into the kitchen. And there at the kitchen table in full view, my father sat at the table with his back to me. I could just see the top of my mother's face beyond him, facing me at the table. And in the flash of a second, I saw my older brother jump into view, just like a movie. I remember it exactly to this day. Pick up one of our tall walnut salt shakers. It might have been salt or pepper. I don't remember. It's about a foot high, solid walnut. Raise it with both hands over his head and smash it on top of my father's head. I'll never forget that loud crack it made on my father's skull. I'll never forget my father groaning as he slid to one side and fell on the floor. And I will never forget my mother, now able to see me as I stood frozen in that living room, and her stern, cold, authoritative voice that said, "Go to school, Barbara." And I sure as hell did. I ran out the door and down the street, but I didn't go to school. I don't remember where I went, and I don't remember the rest of the day. But that event was so vivid and so impressionable to me, I will never forget it. And so that's an example of how I remember these very emotionally filled moments. And that is why I'm able to write my books. because I write about the moments that are still vivid in my mind. And yes, it's my story. Now, if I would have spoken to my mother after that, chances are she would have denied it. She would have said, "Oh no, your brother never did that." My father would not have been able to respond because, well, he ended up in the hospital. He ended up okay. My brother would have denied it because that's what he always did. He lied. And life would have gone on, and that would have been that. But I was a witness to something horrific, and I will never forget that experience. So I kind of got off track a little bit, but if other people can honor what someone's story is, it might give you a bigger perspective as to what the reason is that person is telling the story in the first place. And if you realize that the story in itself is not the main focus, because I'm sure there were other things going on in that kitchen, but my focus was on my brother and how he picked up that salt shaker or pepper shaker. Our dog might have ran away. My other brother might have been there. I don't remember. I wasn't focused on it. All of my survival skills were focused on my abusive brother. So there you go. I'm curious as to what your reactions are, and it's getting really dark in here. I'll try to lighten it up. I apologize. And I love all your comments because so many really cause me to think more about things that I might be able to talk about in terms of expanding on these topics. And so thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And yeah, feel free to leave your comments as always. Gosh, I enjoy my channel so much. I'm up to 20,920 something. Unbelievable. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I'm appreciative, I'm humble, and I'm stunned. Because why the heck would anybody want to hear me? Because no one has for almost 70 years. And now I have my YouTube channel, and I'm in shock. And I'm so glad that I can offer helpful videos. I really am deeply touched and deeply honored. So thanks so much, everyone. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are in the world. Do something nice for yourself. Do something nice for someone else. And smile at a stranger. Or help someone who's elderly somewhere. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care.